Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. If you aren't aware, it's our 80th episode tonight, which is pretty exciting. And thanks for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community, mentorship, and learning. I'm your host, Dave Nava. I'm a lead solution engineer at Salesforce and a military trailblazer. Each week, we invite a co-host, in this case, co-hosts, to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, their expertise, and their unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is exploring the technical security architect career path. So, if you're interested in cybersecurity, data compliance and privacy, or how to get started on this path, any of those, this is the session for you. I'd like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-hosts for tonight's session, Rachel Beard and Mike Smith. Rachel is a distinguished security technical architect at Salesforce. She's been in the Salesforce ecosystem for over 15 years, with experience as a system administrator, consultant, solution architect, product marketer, and architect. Mike is also a distinguished security technical architect at Salesforce, and he's been in the tech industry for over 26 years. He began his career as a software engineer at Oracle, moved to solution architecture for 10 years, and has been at Salesforce for over 8 years, spanning several different roles. It is awesome to have you here co-hosting Office Hours with me. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, David. Great to be here.
Yeah. If you could each take a moment to introduce yourselves a bit further and share your Salesforce stories, that'd be great. Rachel, do you want to lead us off?
Sure, why not? So yeah, actually, I probably need to update my bio. I always seem to age myself up with my oldest daughter's birthday because that was about the time that I changed careers. I had been working as a sales rep, came back after a paltry 6 weeks of mat leave, and realized that I loved using Salesforce. I wanted to learn more about the back end of it and took some courses when I came back and became an admin, really fell in love as my company's admin and took more courses, got to become a certified developer, and then went into consulting for a long time. So I did a lot of implementation work over several years and then joined Salesforce 8 years ago in customer success. Loved being a trusted advisor to our customers, but again, wanted to expand and learn more. I was already a platform security specialist, and then I became the product marketing manager for Shield, which really changed my knowledge from customer-facing implementation to understanding business value and messaging. And then ultimately, I took the skills I gained from all of those things and brought them into my current role, which is more of a pre-sales architecture capacity. So I have to understand messaging and positioning and building great slides and demos, but I also need to understand our customers' use cases and what they're doing with their Salesforce solutions and why security concerns are so top of mind for them.
That's awesome. It's cool that Shield was your inroad to your current kind of focus. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Mike, do you want to take over?
Sure. So I guess my Salesforce story goes back about, 12 or 15 years when I was a solution architect at Web Methods. It was after I had left Oracle, went into pre-sales for the first time, and was doing integrations amongst a lot of different enterprise applications. So I learned to call the Salesforce API and use our Salesforce adapter and do integrations between Salesforce and all manner of other systems, and didn't really become a Salesforce expert per se, but I did move into a pre-sales role at Salesforce about 8.5 years ago, and that's when I was in a platform solution engineering role, platform technical architect, where I helped customers understand how to build custom apps on the platform. And that just so happened to be right when Salesforce Shield was coming out as a product. And it was under the purview of the platform SE team. So I was tasked with supporting the sales of Salesforce Shield. So kind of like Rachel, that's really kind of how I got my focus on the security side. I started, kind of becoming an expert, if you will, at least tried to know more than everybody else did, right, on these products. I stuck with it. And after about 3 years, we created a security architects team, and I was one of the first members on that team, and I've been here ever since.
Awesome. So Shield was your gateway as well.
Yeah,
it's cool you have that in common. Awesome. Thank you for the introductions. So what we'll do now is I always like to go over the purpose of office hours for those folks who may be watching for the first time on YouTube later or joining for the first time tonight before we open the floor for questions and discussion. So these sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with military trailblazers and allies, everyone's welcome, to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding related topics to help you achieve your professional development and career related goals. So for this next hour, this is your opportunity to collaborate and participate in collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and help both ask and answer questions from your perspective, which of course provides diversity of experience to the answers given and a much richer dialogue. Do keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. I've already started posting little snippets in there from LinkedIn, Twitter, opportunities, knowledge articles, that sort of thing. And other folks will post in there typically as well. If you'd like to ask a question at any point during tonight's session, please feel free to do so. This is your session. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up, no worries. You can post it in chat. I'll ask it for you, and I will do my best to keep my eyes on both hands raised and comments in chat. And then finally, tonight's session is being recorded. So if you want to share an attribution-free comment, let me know before speaking, and I will go ahead and make sure that that is edited out before the final recording. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And I was going to ask you what piqued your initial interest in data security and privacy specifically, but we already kind of talked about that. It was Salesforce Shield. So I'll move on to kind of a hierarchy question. I was looking at the org chart in Salesforce, and it occurred to me that you both fall under a sales leader, although you work for different teams. And so though you have the same role, I'm wondering what the differences are between the work that you each do at Salesforce under that same role. So maybe your day-to-day, if you could talk about that.
So actually, until recently, Mike and I were on the same team. We were both supporting all of the AMER non-industry accounts. Well, I don't know how to explain that better. Maybe you can, Mike. But in any case, I moved over recently to support specifically our healthcare and life sciences customers because they had a very strong need. As you can imagine, all of our HLS customers are storing data that could be construed as being sensitive or PHI data. They have increased regulatory demands as well as reputationally that they need to protect their stakeholders' data and be seen as a trusted provider. So we have similar roles on paper. We work in different verticals, but even with that, I would say that Mike and I, at the same kind of distinguished area of our careers, have different focuses and different passions within Salesforce security, which might already sound like a niche, but it's actually quite broad. So for me, I really enjoy focusing on human layer security and understanding all the ways that employees of a business can be exploited, either when it comes to account credential compromise, but especially data leakage, bad actor, someone who's leaving the business, especially as we see now in the Great Resignation type of events, or accidental data leakage, someone's making a mistake because they're going too quickly, or even a new hire who's maybe misusing data, and that could be a compliance issue as well. So that's one of the things that I spend a lot of my time working on content for, and developing presentations and speaking to external partners and at conferences and things like that.
That's
Mike,
interesting.
What do you think of it?
Yeah, so like Rachel said, we have similar roles, same title. We tend to take different focuses based on what we are passionate about, what we're interested in. And that's a really cool thing about our role. From a technical perspective, I really enjoy encryption technologies. So helping our customers understand how they can manage encryption keys, either in Salesforce or externally. And so I work with a lot of partners who do encryption key management and other similar types of tools outside of Salesforce. But I also have a strong passion for data privacy, and I have stories behind that if you're interested. But our tools go a lot beyond Shield now. We have Privacy Center, Security Center, other products that we are responsible for. I spend a lot of my time with the Privacy Center product management team, rolling out that product in the beginning, but also new features of that product as they come along. So yeah, even though Rachel and I have the same title, we focus on what we're passionate about and what we really enjoy helping our customers understand as it relates to Salesforce.
Okay, that's cool. Thanks for going into that kind of the broad overview of how your roles, though similar, differ. I was wondering if we could kind of take a week in the life of each one of your roles and talk about some of the day-to-day activities. I know we've discussed it at a broad level thus far, but maybe if you could go into, probably not this week because it's a short week, but a typical week for you and what it looks like from a team structure perspective, what roles you support, and then what are some things that you're doing in the moment to support data security, data privacy, and the other goals that you have as an architect?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start. So the groups I support are not the same as Rachel's. Generally speaking, I support many different industries, including manufacturing, automotive, engineering, communication, media, high tech. I have supported financial services and HLS, healthcare and life sciences in the past, and I still do to some extent. We kind of reach across teams to support each other, but I'm at a pretty high level on my team. I support the newer members or others on their deals, and when I say on their deals, I mean helping them with customer calls that tend to go very deep or very technical, especially about the things that I am an expert on. So within a typical week, I might take several calls with CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, and others on the information security team to help them understand how we do security in Salesforce. So that's one of my main roles, is really that customer facing piece of it. But at my level also, I do a lot of trying to find ways to help our team scale. Like if I find something that works, I want to roll it out and help the rest of the team learn how to use it. So basically scaling myself across the team. So that includes doing a lot of enablement of newer features and newer products, not just for my team so much really, but the broader SE teams, the technical architects, the core SEs, also the platform account executives, and finding ways to help them understand the product better and help their customers understand the products better. So in addition to that, there's working with the product management teams and kind of being the liaison between them and the customer, or between them and the field sales teams. So that includes gathering feedback from the customer base and feedback that has come in through our sales teams and technical architects as to what they want to see in the product. So trying to consolidate that, take it back to the product teams and say, here's what we think the product needs. And that's just one of the avenues that our product teams uses to enhance the product and understand how to meet the broader market needs. So it's really a pretty broad spectrum of what we do in terms of helping customers understand the Salesforce product set from a security, compliance, and privacy perspective. I don't know, Rachel, you probably
get to be.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just going to queue up Rachel, but yeah.
I'll say my piece.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say it's interesting that not only do you get to be customer focused, you're also internally focused, and I think probably the most exciting thing is you're kind of the pointy end of the spear where you get to get that direct feedback from the customer to improve the product and work with product managers to make it even better. So that's just really cool.
Yeah,
that's one of the things that I like the most about what we do, is that we oftentimes get to be in the center of the customer, their feedback, their use cases, especially with some of the newer solutions, but even ongoing with things like Shield. And then we really do get to interface with the product team and help them not just understand, what's coming in from a feedback perspective, but what to prioritize in the roadmap. And then we get to communicate that information back out to our customers. It's actually really fun and unique to our role, I think. So yeah, a lot of the things that Mike said are really common to mine. No day is the same, no week is the same. One of the things that I love about my role is that I have a good bit of autonomy and in decision making about how I can best help and what are the ways that I'm going to engage either with customers or partners or product and all of that. And I do have some fair amount of autonomy over my schedule, which is also really nice, especially as a parent, because I'm sure many of you can relate. you think you're done when you get the older kids, but then they just have more after school activities and things, and you're running to pick them up and go be somewhere. So it's nice that I have that kind of level of flexibility into most of my days, not all of my days. I do meet a lot with customers. Sometimes I'm very in the weeds talking to developers or privacy or compliance teams and getting real technical. Sometimes I'm talking to a CISO, like Mike mentioned earlier, and we're talking more vision. What is the overall security and compliance landscape looking like? What am I hearing from other similar companies? Where's Salesforce going in terms of our vision for security in the future? A lot of times I do that through some of our events, whether it's presenting in an SIC, like an executive briefing at Dreamforce or the World Tour. Sometimes I'm speaking in breakout sessions. I've even gotten to be a part of the World Tour keynote before, which was really fun. And then I'm oftentimes on our product marketing webinars, and also our partners invite me. So, I mean, just in the last couple of weeks, I was out in California. I'm in Pennsylvania now. California for a whole customer app developer day, which was really cool. Very in the weeds. Let's talk about building apps. And at the same time, I'm planning a similar day that's going to coincide with the New York World Tour later this month. And at the same time, I'm working on 2 different partners webinars. And at the same time, I had some cool new idea for threat modeling that I'm also trying to flesh out and get some support from product marketing to help make it really cool looking, because the idea in my head's cool, but on my slide, not so cool, not my skill set. And then at the same time, also fielding customer calls. So it's a little bit of everything, and it's a lot of time management and prioritization.
That's interesting. And with all the things that you're doing, it's great that you kind of get to some input into your work-life balance. I can definitely identify with having the older kids, and they're still asking me for stuff. It's just different stuff than they used to ask me for. So
I have 2 teenagers. The stuff, it's real straightforward. It's money and rides. That's what they want. Oh, and food, which I would kind of put under money and rides anyway, because like the younger one's like, let's go to Chipotle. Are you buying?
yeah, I have two teenage boys. Actually, one's 20 now, so similar.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Mike, do you get the opportunity to participate in speaking engagements and some of the things that Rachel was talking about with the broader community?
I do, and I'll be at the New York World Tour as well. Rachel, maybe I'll see you there. I've got a couple of sessions there. I've got a theater session on security and Salesforce, and then a kind of a roundtable session for talking about data governance in Salesforce. But I usually have a session or 2 at Dreamforce, and I, especially the last few years, have really tried to get out more into the community and speak at industry events. And getting there has been a journey. I first started out speaking, well, in addition to what we do as part of our go-to-market, we put on workshops. So as a sales team, we will bring customers in and get them together in a room. But there, kind of took that from there into working more with product marketing and getting on stage at Dreamforce. So it's probably my next kind of leap into building my brand, if you will, or getting a reputation. From there, I began to get invited to speak with partners, sometimes on a webinar, sometimes at a security conference. They might have a theater session that they've set up, and they'll talk about how they help secure data in Salesforce. And then I started submitting my own proposals to security conferences. And they don't always get accepted. It's a very competitive landscape out there when you're trying to get on stage at Black Hat or at an IPP conference. But we also have a lot of regional meetings as well, like Cloud Security Alliance has monthly meetings in Denver, where I live, and so I go down there sometimes. I've spoken at their meetings, and there are also other security groups around town that have monthly meetings. Those are a little easier to get into, but they also help build your credibility, because when you go and submit a paper for a larger conference, they will ask for basically credentials. Where else have you spoken? Do you have YouTube videos you can share, or an abstract that shows where you've spoken at other conferences. So it's been kind of a journey getting to the point where I'm at, and it's continuing, because I'm still at a point where at least half of my papers don't get accepted, and it's a challenge to try and find new material that's meaningful and timely for the audience that's going to be at whatever venue you're going to be at.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know how you both find time to get back to the community with thought leadership as well as do your jobs. I know that I spoke for the first time at Dreamforce, and that literally took like 2 months of extra hours, weekends to get ready. So the fact that you're doing that on the day-to-day is really impressive. I wanted to dive in a bit to some of the, I guess, more specifics with the data privacy and data security challenges. And so in the military, there's a saying that everyone is a safety officer, meaning obviously that everyone has a responsibility to ensure the safety of their unit, and if you see something, say something. So with that in mind, it would make sense that every customer facing role should be having security focused conversations with their customers. And for those other folks on the call, that could be you as a consultant, right? Meeting with your client, in working for a system integrator. It could be you as an admin when your customer's internal and you want to be having talks with your users to make sure they're using good data privacy practices. So what are some of the data privacy and security mistakes that you see customers making, just so we have that awareness?
Yeah, so one is assuming that your data is safe just because it's in Salesforce, right? Salesforce is known as a very secure service, and it is. You can put your data in Salesforce and know that it's going to be protected on our end. But at the same time, if you don't configure your Salesforce org properly, you're leaving the door open, right? You need good hygiene when it comes to setting up who can see what, making sure users only have access to data that they need to do their job, right? Set strong passwords, two-factor authentication. All of these things are on the customer. So it's really a shared responsibility. And spend a lot of our time, I think Rachel would concur, spend a lot of our time helping customers understand that security in Salesforce is a large part of that is on the onus of the customer to make sure that they are using the security tools that we've made available to them.
Yeah. And sometimes I sound like the boring, annoying grown up that I never wanted to grow up to be, but there's a lot of have you done your paperwork? Do you actually understand what data you're collecting, why, and what's the sensitivity level of your data, and where did you write that down? How can you show the documentation? It's not fun, oftentimes, those types of conversations, but they're essential because we really do have to get down to that level of what is the sensitive data, what could be personal information or health data or competitive insights, and what level of protection needs to be added at each layer. And then also kind of contrary sometimes, especially when I'm doing these app dev workshops, which I love, is we hear folks saying, oh, go fast, look how easy, you can build a flow, you can add a custom field, build a custom object, you're done in 10 minutes. And I'm there going, wait, no, stop, slow down. What are you building? Why are you building it? How is it going to interact with all the other different things? Who needs to see it in production? Who should have access to see it in a sandbox? Do you have third-party contractors in that sandbox? Do you have developers who wouldn't normally see that data in production? Does it need to be encrypted for your compliance reasons? Do we need to make sure that that data doesn't get downloaded out of the app? So it's really important to make sure that all of that is really well thought out and tested and documented to prevent problems later. So David, similar to your comment that you made, I never served, but I have done about 100 Go Ruck events. And one of the things that the cadre always say when we're doing some kind of time hack event, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And that's one of the principles I really try to use is let's go slow, make sure we understand who has the responsibility for what, who should have access for what, how do we test it, how do we document it, and then deploy it with confidence at the end. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, those are great points. It's obviously much easier to build with security in mind than to go back and fix with security in mind after you've already got everything set up.
Yeah, and you can't, I mean, there's only so much you can do about reputational damage. So even forget about the fines, whether you have a breach or a compliance issue, the reputational damage lingers, and that's very, very difficult to repair later. So it's important to make sure that you've done your best to prevent that.
Absolutely. And you bring up the concept of a breach. One of my questions was, it definitely sounds like the both of you and Mike laid the groundwork to prevent breaches and talking with customers and enabling, your colleagues internally at Salesforce. Do you deal with now active breaches and cyber attacks? And if you don't, is that part of your role? That you're not doing that, or is it a different role?
So for me, I really focus on the insider threat. So what is the damage that the companies or our customers, users could do? So I'm thinking about somebody who is leaving the business and is going to download data with them and take it to a competitor. I'm worried about the person who is going to maybe destroy data, erase something or something else, or the folks who are accidentally downloading data that they shouldn't, things like that. I'm much more concerned with insider threat because we do have other teams who are managing more of the cybersecurity side of the house. So I know that they have that's their domain, and I'm more focused on coaching our customers. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, so we more often get questions along the lines of, we think that someone maybe internally took some data that they shouldn't have and left the company with it. Maybe they quit and went somewhere else. How could we prevent that? And so Rachel and I will say, well, here's what you could have done. And we'll position our solutions around security and data privacy to prevent it in the future. So we're more of a help customers understand on the front end how you're going to prevent a data breach. When it comes to an active incident, we have site reliability engineering teams and security operations who will troubleshoot, triage, and then also talk to customers about what is the status of that incident, what happened and why, what we're doing to mitigate and prevent it in the future. We don't get deeply involved in those conversations, but we do get questions sometimes from customers who heard something in the news and they say, well, what happened in that incident? So we do have to have, the high level understanding of what happened and why and what we're doing to prevent it in the future. But we're not on the front lines of triaging and troubleshooting when the incident happens.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate the clarification there. Iris has a question in chat, and she says, I love the sound of your data security jobs. I did a cyber certification and then found out entry-level cyber jobs were solitary roles working at inconducive times to allow for mothering. What kind of entry-level data security role do you think is good, aside from an awesome admin, for a Salesforce data security career path? So those entry-level roles,
I would love to answer this question because this is one of the things that drives me just bonkers out here, is that as a woman in security and a mom in security, let alone being a woman or a mom in tech, there's not a lot of us out here. And I think that there's some level of understanding that these are competitive jobs that are also not just skilled, but somewhat of a higher intensity and higher commitment. And I think in general, women are graduating at the same, if not higher rates in STEM careers than men are, but I'm not seeing them in the workforce. And I think that a lot of times that the environment can be off-putting to some when they look at it. But really, once you get involved, a lot of it is being able to understand your own value and overcoming some of that imposter syndrome so that you can say things like, I need to leave to go pick up a kid, which I do have to say. And actually, folks like Mike have made me feel more comfortable because we have great dads on our team saying that. So it's not just me saying that. So to that end, having a supportive team and having a supportive team leadership and company culture is really what's important here, because if everyone feels comfortable to have work-life balance, then moms can have work-life balance, right? You can't just point it at the moms. But I think in general, it doesn't have to be like the 60-hour work week. I'm not working a 60-hour work week. It doesn't have to be sitting in a cubicle all day. I'm not sitting in a cubicle all day. It doesn't have, there's a lot of things like that that might be misconceptions. So I would say, number one, if I was looking to start my career, I would not spend too much time working looking at the job descriptions, at the requirements, because guess what? I don't have the requirements on the job description for the job that I have now. There are certifications listed there that I just don't have. I don't have them. And I also don't have a master's degree either. So don't worry about that. Like, if you're interested in the job, reach out. It's always good if you can make connections and have an intro. But also, as we've talked about, and everyone here who's a Trailblazer understands that getting involved through Trailhead demonstrates some knowledge and understanding, as well as getting involved with nonprofits can help you get a reference for some work done on that project. And then above and beyond that, I really think it's the company culture that you really have to be looking for and asking. I am over 40, and I remember being told things like, never let them walk you out to your car so that they might see car seats, because then they'll know that you're a parent, and they'll think you're not going to work very hard, or they'll know, like, this is nonsense that we don't need to have this in our minds anymore. Good employers will understand, and they'll value your time and value the fact that you need to rest and recharge as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for digging into that and kind of dispelling some of those, calling attention to some of those prejudices and dispelling the notion that any of those are valid.
It's just not. And I really, like, I know I said this earlier, but I started my career when my daughter was 6 weeks old. She's 16 now. Like, I love my job. I could not be doing this day in and day out. And it goes without saying, for anyone who has kids, there's good days and bad days, right? But even on the bad days, I have the support that I need to keep going. And just the company itself and the people I work with. And like I said, being a woman in security, it's weird being on your own sometimes, but it's also joyful because you get to really be a trailblazer.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to piggyback a bit on Iris's question. It's a great segue. What are some of those kind of entry level, like, if someone wanted to be in your shoes one day, obviously as a distinguished security technical architect, it's a long career path. You are nowhere near the entry level. You're technical experts in your field. But if someone wanted to get to that point, aside from being a system administrator, what are some of those entry level roles that will expose them to data privacy, data security, and all the things that you do, so that they could eventually follow that path?
Yeah, so it's interesting to note that this is a fairly new career path, right? Our titles didn't exist 20 years ago, right? There were no chief information security officers 20, 30 years ago. The internet and the things around information security and being able to work, dial into your company from outside, and being connected to the outside world, all of these have completely changed the dynamics in IT. So my point being, there's not a well-defined path to get here. Rachel and I got here from different angles. Everybody you talk to at a high level in this industry got here in different ways. Doesn't require a degree in cybersecurity, although that is one way. Doesn't require a degree in IT. There are many leaders in cybersecurity who have a liberal arts background or a military background or many different backgrounds. But one thing I would say that has helped me to get here is just a very broad view of enterprise software and systems in general. So, you went over my background in the beginning. There's actually a lot more nuance, a lot more detail to that. I started out in customer support at JD Edwards, which was later acquired by Oracle. So I was answering phones for financial software for a couple of years before I went into consulting there. I had a stint in product development, and then I went into IT as a developer. And I was all together there for about 8 years before I went into solution engineering, which is a pre-sales role at Web Methods, which does integration. So all of this background, it all contributed to my being able to transition into a security role. And you'll hear that about a lot of different security roles. There's a lot of different paths into it. And one thing that I've seen a number of security professionals doing to get into security before they were in it is, maybe they were in networking, maybe they were in development, maybe they were in support, wherever they were, they had a strong interest in security and data privacy. So they started looking for opportunities where they sat to become, maybe it's the security knowledgeable person on their team, maybe the go-to person anytime there is a security question, but also to understand the nuances of security and how it's relevant to their current role. So when a security does come up, they're in a position to transition into it or to make a move up because maybe they've got some security super badge or other security focus or privacy focus from Salesforce Trailhead, or maybe external certifications or whatever, which you can build up in many different ways. But it's really that broad spectrum of experience that security professionals bring into the security role.
It's great to hear that, you don't necessarily have to jump right into the role. You can pursue your passion of security in your current role just by, kind of configuring the work that you do to evolve around that. So that's helpful. To kind of continue along with that vein, I know, Rachel, you had mentioned that you didn't have some of the certifications that were in your current job description. I think one of the questions we usually get is, what certifications do I need for this role? And it makes sense that you would probably need to have a base level of Salesforce certifications. I would assume maybe some data architecture certifications. Beyond that, and I know they may not be required, but what would be good if someone doesn't have a background in security to get? Because I know there's a whole laundry list of different certifications in alphabet soup, and it can be hard to sort that out.
Yeah. So what we're doing is really specific to Salesforce security and compliance and data privacy topics. So I might have other interests and focus than what you would find from a security person who works at AWS, for example. In my role, I came in with 5 Salesforce certifications, but none of like the networking certifications or data privacy certifications. I joined Salesforce as a platform security specialist in customer success with those certs, and then went on to learn the security suite of products, and then of course grew through Trailhead, and I'm over 400 badges now to keep learning. I still have not gone back and done CISSP or some of the other certifications that others have, and I'm not sure if I will, because they don't really come up in the type of work that I do. In my line of work, it's really important that I understand the data that our customers are using and the challenges that they face with managing the security and compliance and privacy of that data. Now, Mike's background is different, and he's got all kinds of cool letters after his name.
Right. So I didn't have any of my current relevant certifications when I started 8 years ago, but I was required, first of all, to get a minimum of 3 Salesforce certifications. So I got Salesforce Admin, Salesforce Advanced Admin, and Salesforce, I think it was Developer, which later turned into the App Developer, slightly different, App Builder maybe. So I've got three of those certs. But then I started, when I really set my sight on moving into the security world, I wanted to establish myself and give myself some credentials. So I really started focusing in on some of the security certifications. And I think it has helped. I think it's helped with promotions. I think it's helped raise my brand externally and internally, in that I've gotten, first of all, I started with the CISSP, that's Cloud Information Systems Security Professional. That's probably one of the flagship certifications in the industry. It's not an easy exam. It's probably not the one I would recommend starting with. After that, I think my next one was the CCSK through the Cloud Security Alliance. That's Certificate of Cloud Security Knowledge. That one I would start with before I would go straight to CISSP if you're looking for a starter. But over time and over the years, my passion has really driven me towards the data privacy space, which is closely related, not the same as security, but I joined the it's IAPP, Information Association of Privacy Professionals, IAPP. And I got, the first certification I got through them was the CIPP US, that's Certified Information Privacy Professional for US. And that one has to do with privacy law in the US, right? So you learn a little bit about other laws as well, Canadian and European, but it's really focused on laws. The next one I got through them is the Certified Information Privacy Technologist, which really aligns more with what I do and allows me to have conversations with security and teams, but also with data privacy professionals, which are a mix of attorneys and technologists. And so it's been a gradual, I don't spend all my time going for certs. And for a while I was going for I thought I would do one per year. And I think that's about the cadence I kept up. Kind of taking a hiatus this year because it's a lot of studying and I've got a lot of certs now. I don't know if I need to keep going. It's funny, there's actually a somewhat of a debate in the industry about how valuable certifications are. I mean, look where Rachel's got. She doesn't have the industry certifications outside of Salesforce, but she's got to a very high level. And she says, I may not need those, and she probably doesn't. It's like a lot of careers you can go on. You don't have to have a college degree to advance in a lot of careers. When it comes to security certifications, a lot of practitioners will scoff at certifications. They're very, very good at what they do, and they turn up their nose to certs. I would say that in the position that I'm in, if you're in sales or if you're in consulting, they do add some credibility so that you can, when you walk in to meet with an executive team that doesn't know who you are, they don't know anything about your credential, but if they see those letters after your name, it gives you a little bit of credibility right off the bat. And I do see value in the actual process of learning and taking the test and the rigor that you have to go through to get there, because a lot of it requires the knowledge of experience that you have as well. And they give you a certain level of ability to speak the language of a security executive. And I think there is value in them. But yeah, as from where I would start, maybe the CCSK might be a good starting point.
And also I would just add on that I think that your certifications demonstrate that you have a broader knowledge that goes beyond just the tiny scope of Salesforce and security, right? You have much more industry knowledge. The other thing I'd mention is that we've seen a few new folks get hired onto our team. Our team's relatively small, so we don't get to hire often, but we've hired folks in from different backgrounds. Some of them had a strong security background and no Salesforce experience. And we've had folks like me who have a lot of Salesforce experience without necessarily the cybersecurity certification. So because our role is very customer facing and really consultative in the way that we help develop a security strategy around their architecture, it really is important to have different types of strengths and personality types on the team to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to deliver things that suit their strengths.
Thanks for digging into that. It's interesting to kind of talk about the perception of certifications, both internally to where you're at, as well as externally in the broader community whenever you're applying for jobs. So it's good to know you don't necessarily have to have those certs. It's context specific, but it definitely helps. And I, Mike, I have the same kind of path with certifications as well. I tend to tackle one per year at this point, just to get back into the learning groove and kind of get back to basics and reestablish the muscle memory for how to learn, because we get wrapped up in the day to day, and it's always nice to be able to go back and dig into those foundational skills. So Tiffany's question is first, and she says, "Hey, when I first heard Salesforce Security Architect, I thought of a consulting team that comes in, assesses, strategizes, implements changes and then moves on to the next company or customer. Is there room or opportunity for non-consultative positions, maybe for the long-term monitoring maintenance stage?" Interesting question for sure.
There's room for, yes. There's so many different roles in this. Rachel and I are in the pre-sales team, so we're not even going in and doing assessments per se on an existing environment. We're talking to customers who don't yet have the tools that we have to offer and helping them understand how they would be a good fit. We do sometimes work with our consulting teams, because often as the output of an assessment, they'll say, you really could probably use some tools that you don't have. Let me introduce you to Mike and Rachel to help you implement those. But then, of course, there are the teams that do the operations and the monitoring. All of the customers that we work with have those teams, and they need those. They need those security professionals who have an eye on what is happening, not just in Salesforce, but in other enterprise apps. And they'll take and consolidate log information, for example, and try and understand if there are threats common to many different enterprise apps. And when there are incidents, what do they do about that? They do the planning for that and make sure that they know how to respond when it does happen, how to recover from that, and so on. So, we're at Salesforce, we're such a large company that we're able to have very distinct roles for very different parts of the process, and we're very highly specialized. It's not always the case that that security professionals are as specialized as we are, but if you wanted to be in a role that is more about security operations and ongoing maintenance of an existing system, absolutely, all of our large customers have those.
Yeah, so what we're doing is really focused on one specific phase of that journey, and that's, like I mentioned, getting really tactical in the weeds, or it could be more strategic. Tactical example, I worked with a media customer and they said, "Hey, look, I've got celebrity data." Let's just say, for example, I've got Cardi B, and I'm a music company, and I've got Cardi B's phone number, her address, I have her assistant, her hairdresser, even her lawyer, and I am contracted to let Cardi know whenever anyone is viewing her data. So I need to know who searches for that data, who actually clicks in and views the record. Is that information surfaced in the list view? Is it in a report? Did anyone download that report? Is anyone downloading documents off of that record? All that kind of stuff. So that's very tactical, helping me understand how to limit sharing and visibility, and then how to monitor ongoing. So I'm going to help them understand what are the tools that they might use, but somebody else might go help them implement that solution. I'm off by that point. On the more strategic side, I had a company that's saying, "Hey, we're going to go public, and we have some sorts of regulated information. So I'm worried about SOX compliance, and I'm worried about these other regulatory policies that I have to address. So what is a good overall way for me to build this in as I deploy my apps, so I know that I'm building safe and secure and with privacy in mind as I develop that?" So could be very strategic, could be very tactical when we're working with customers, and then all the other stuff we mentioned, like speaking at events and creating new content. We are not the people that are like monitoring the Salesforce network like you might think about in a more traditional cybersecurity career, which is what I think some of the questions are getting at, like working all the time in isolation, or the soft skills and things like that. What we're doing is very collaborative with our customers.
Yeah, thanks for providing clarity on that, and great question, Tiffany. And so it sounds like at all stages of utilization of the product, from designing the product to implementing it, whether you're a system integrator or and then also to maintaining it, security. There are positions within security for all those stages, the full life cycle. So that's great to know.
Yeah.
I wanted to move on to Andrea's question. Also a great question. How do soft skills help in your career? In cybersecurity, I keep hearing about how human behavior is the biggest hurdle in securing systems.
Well, yeah, and that's where I really get it very interested in. So my background, my college degree was psychology, not computer science. Mm-mm. And so it doesn't surprise anybody that human layer security ended up being my kind of passion project within. And we do know that something like 80 to 90% of data breaches are attributed to the human element. And even when we're talking about something like ransomware, which isn't something that I expect most of our Salesforce admins to be worried about. But you do need to think about, well, if you have, what precautions do you have in place? How are you backing up your data, and who has permissions, things like that. And especially when we get to things like account credential compromise and making sure that you have strong authentication processes for MFA and SSO to keep intruders out. And then, like I mentioned, all the things that your users can do once they're logged in, and how can you reduce the surface of risk there. So that's where, for me, I think I succeed very strongly as somebody who has the technical skills and the soft skills to work with our teams. And then the other thing too is sometimes we're really in the middle of a family therapy kind of a moment with these customers, where you have IT is saying this, security is saying this, maybe you have a data privacy team, and then you have the business saying, hello, we need to be able to use this stuff, right? So sometimes we have to really be able to understand what everyone's pain points are together to help give them a solution that's secure while allowing them to build the tools that they need to be effective.
So it sounds like being a referee is part of that soft skill acumen.
Referee, cat herder, therapist, all of it. Yeah.
What's your take on the soft skills aspect, man?
Yeah. So obviously Rachel and I have to have communication skills and be able to present in front of crowds. But that's not every security architect role or security role. What you will need, though, in general in security, is the ability to communicate why what you're doing is important. And it's so important to educate, the end user, for example, on why they shouldn't click on bad links. Security is everybody's job. Everybody has to understand, what they need to do to help keep the enterprise secure. And it's the security professional's job to help educate them on that. So you've got to go to the user and help them understand that, but you've also got to go up the chain and get funding for your project, right? Not that most security professionals speak to the board. If you're a CISO, you speak to the board and you ask for money. If you're lower than that, you speak to the, the manager, the director, the VP, the CISO, all the way up. And you've got to make a case for why what you're working on is critical for the company, because there's not a lot of security doesn't make money, right, for the company. It helps prevent threats, and it is necessary. And it's important for the security professional to be able to explain to the business why it is necessary. And of course, soft skills are involved in that.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point is, how can you justify the expense of security? Because when security is working, nothing happens, right? There's no breaches.
Right.
Well, how do you know that it was either great security or just no one was attacking? So I can see how negotiation would play a vital role in the soft skill arena. Let's see. I wanted to call out, Amber shared the Who Sees What series link in chat. That's a great video series. Whether you've been in the industry for a while or a day, I always like to go to those video series and relook at them, because it reminds me of all the things that I kind of in my role take for granted as a solution engineer, because I don't necessarily have to build security in. I have to be mindful of it and I have to talk about it. But when I'm building a demo, it's not something I address. So I always like to go back to those videos and kind of refresh my memory. And it's also great for studying for certs. And then Rachel's point, there are some awesome new super badges out. Security governance is among them. So do take a look at those. And what I love about those, because I was actually looking at those, is they refresh the content, and you're actually getting to use MFA. You're getting to use a lot of the new features that you aren't necessarily seeing or weren't seeing in some of the super badges prior to. And so, process builder's been replaced with flow, and all the cool new stuff is in the super badges. And plus, they're more accessible because they're shorter and more accessible units. They're not, something that's going to take you, 3 weeks to get through, which I've been there in the past with some of those older super patches.
Badges are no joke, but I've actually had the privilege of getting to work on a few now. So that's been really fun also for me to give back in that way. I love Trailhead, so that's my primary method of learning these days.
Yeah, it is mine as well. We've got about 3 minutes left. And so Iris had asked a question about what happens when there is a security breach. And so I know that you mentioned earlier in the conversation that you're not necessarily on the front lines of that, but are you able to speak to how does Salesforce, obviously within the confines of what you can share, how do they deal with that, and what's kind of the general process for mitigating a breach?
Yeah, and Iris, it's funny that that you said that, because actually that's something we have a lot of documentation about. So you can go to the fact that you said you're probably not allowed to say. Of course, trust.salesforce.com will always have, uptime and things like that, but there's also security.salesforce.com and compliance.salesforce.com. You can actually toggle between them, and there's a lot of documentation there. One of the really fun, just lots of documentation exercises is our security and privacy architecture document, which breaks out a lot of what goes into protecting the data. And then, of course, we do have requirements about how and when we would notify our customers in the event of a breach event. I had another thought that I wanted to say, though, that I thought was more interesting. I blanked on it. I'll come back to it, though, if I remember.
I was just pointing out at a very high level that our security team is very well prepared for incidents, and they know what they're going to do. They use frameworks like the NIST cybersecurity framework, which, the steps are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And they have plans for all of those phases and they're constantly, working to improve every one of those and looking for ways that we can get better.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have a ton of tooling. So all the things that we have for continuous threat monitoring and round the clock patching. But now I remembered what it was that I wanted to say. The part that I find really interesting is that as admins and developers, we're all familiar with the fact that Salesforce has the 3 major releases per year. Well, what's interesting about that from a security perspective is that it's not like your phone, which could get out of date if you don't update it, right? You have to upgrade to the latest iOS or whatever type of phone you're using. With Salesforce, we're automatically going to move you to the latest code version. So as we're continuing to detect vulnerabilities and then test our patches in our test environment, we know that we can deploy that patch globally and that all of our customers are running the same code base. So that actually allows us to respond so much quicker. We're not testing it for different versions, backwards compatibility. It allows us to actually move extremely quickly in the face of any kind of vulnerability event.
Awesome. Great question, Iris, and I appreciate the answer. Obviously, Salesforce's number one core value is trust. So, because we're entrusted with customer data, which is our most important asset. So it's good to know that we have all those processes in place. Of course, we take it seriously. We are, folks, out of time. But before we do close, I wanted to thank Mike and Rachel for spending the past hour with us to talk to us about data privacy, about security, and about their roles at Salesforce. Really appreciate it. It's been extremely informative. I always learn something at these sessions, and this has been no exception. So thank you.
All right. Thanks for having us.
Inviting us. It was great chatting with everyone.
Yeah, and thank you to all of you for attending, especially in the midst of your Thanksgiving preparations, if you do celebrate. Please join us next week. And in the meantime, stay safe and have a great rest of your week. Happy holiday and a great weekend.
Thanks.
Right. Happy Thanksgiving. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.